Thank you for listening to Depictions Media Radio.
Welcome to Policy and Rights, the show about government policy and human rights. Welcome back to Policy and Rights here on Depictions Media Radio. I'm your host, Michael Clogs, and we have heard the release of the federal budget. The Liberals put it together, and the Conservative Party is criticizing it, saying, is it more NDP than it is Liberal? Have the Liberals converted to being NDPers because of the latest agreement between the NDP and the Liberals. While the criticism is real and the possibilities of some of the NDP agenda being included in the budget that was released is probably very true. There probably is some give and take in there in order to get the budget passed, that the Liberals made some concessions to include some of what the NDP actually wants to see happen. With all that being said, is this budget truly going to serve people? Is it truly going to help make the economy usable for people? There's a lot of talk about the gross national product and how the Liberal government has created lots of jobs for people, but there's still the underlying question of who is the budget really going to serve the greatest? Is it going to serve the oil and gas, the big corporations, the Walmarts, or is it going to serve the people like you and me who are simply sitting at home trying to enjoy our lives and make a living? So, again, let's listen to the release of the federal budget that happened a few days ago and think about what is being said and what we are actually seeing happening in our own homes and communities.
Concerning the budget presentation.
Orders of the day, government orders, consideration of Ways and Means, motion number 3 concerning the budgetary policy of the government.
Ms. Freeland, seconded by Mr. Boissonneau, moves that this House approve in general the budgetary policy of the government. The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to Standing Order 83-1, I would like to table in both official languages the budget documents for 2022, including the notices of Ways and Means motions. Les détails.
The details concerning the measures included therein are set out in these documents, and pursuant to Standing Order 83-2, I request that the study of these motions be listed on the orders of the day.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, we all remember that Thursday in March. just over 2 years ago, when our travel plans were hastily canceled, when our children came home from school, when we all rushed to the grocery stores to buy toilet paper and hand sanitizer. We realized then that this virus would disrupt our lives. But few of us imagined quite how much or for quite how long. And yet, here we are. We bent, but we did not break. Canadians have done everything that was asked of them, and more, Mr. Speaker. And so, to all of them, to all of you, I want to start by saying thank you.
And I now have the honor of tabling my second federal budget. I tabled my first in April of 2021. In the year preceding it, the Canadian economy had teetered on the brink. Our economy contracted by 17%, the deepest recession since the 1930s. 3 million Canadians lost their jobs. This was a shattering economic blow. The Great Depression scarred this country for a generation or more. It was entirely reasonable to fear that the COVID recession would likewise hamstring us for years, that millions of Canadians would still today be without jobs, and that the task of rebuilding our country would be the work of decades. We knew that we could not let that happen, and so we provided unprecedented emergency support to Canadian families and Canadian businesses. Our relentless focus was on jobs, on keeping Canadians employed, and on keeping their employers afloat. It was an audacious plan, and it worked.
Our economy has now recovered 112% of the jobs that were lost during those awful first months. Compared to just 90% in the United States. Our employment rate is down to just 5.5%, close to the 5.4% low in 2019 that was Canada's best in 5 decades. Our real GDP is more than a full percentage point above where it was before the pandemic. Think about that. After a devastating recession, after wave after wave, and lockdown after lockdown, our economy has not just recovered. It is booming. Today, Canada has come roaring back. But Canadians know that fighting COVID and the COVID recession came at a high price. Inflation, a global phenomenon, is making things more expensive in Canada, too. Snarled supply chains have driven prices higher at the checkout counter. Buying a house is out of reach for far too many Canadians. And now, Putin's barbaric war is making food and gas even more expensive. The money that rescued Canadians and the Canadian economy, 8 out of every $10 invested, was deployed chiefly and rightly by the federal government. But our ability to spend is not infinite. The time for extraordinary COVID support is over. And we will review and reduce government spending because that is the responsible thing to do. On this point, Mr. Speaker, let me be very clear. We are absolutely determined that our debt to GDP ratio must continue to decline. Our deficits must continue to be reduced. The pandemic debt we incurred to keep Canadians safe and solvent must be paid down, and it is being paid down. This is our fiscal anchor. This is a line we will not cross. It will ensure that our finances remain sustainable. Canada has a proud tradition of fiscal responsibility. It is my duty to maintain it, and I will. So, now is the time for us to focus, with smart investments and a clarity of purpose, on growing our economy and on making life more affordable for Canadians. That is what our government proposes to do. And here's how we propose to do it. Pillar 1 of our plan is investing in the backbone of a strong and growing country, our people. Commençons par le logement.
Let me start with housing. Housing is a basic human need, but it is also an economic imperative. Our economy is built by people, and people need homes in which to live. But here's the problem. Canada does not have enough homes. We need more of them, and fast. This budget represents perhaps the most ambitious plan that Canada has ever had to solve that fundamental problem. Over the next 10 years, we will double the number of new homes we build. This must become a great national effort, and it will demand a new spirit of collaboration. Provinces and territories, cities and towns, the private sector and nonprofits, all working together with us to build the homes that Canadians need.
Over the next 10 years, we will double the number of new homes we will build. This must become a great national effort, and it will demand a new spirit of collaboration. Provinces and territories, cities and towns, the private sector and nonprofits all working together with us to build the homes that Canadians need. We will invest in building more homes and in bringing down the barriers that keep them from being built. We will invest in the rental housing that so many count on. We will make it easier for our young people to get those first keys of their own. And we will make the market fairer for Canadians. We will prevent foreign investors from parking their money in Canada by buying up homes. We will make sure that houses are being used as homes for Canadian families rather than as a speculative financial asset class. But on housing, I would like to offer one caution. There is no one silver bullet which will immediately, once and forever, make every Canadian a homeowner in the neighborhood where they want to live. As Canada grows, and as a growing Canada becomes more and more prosperous, we will need to continue to invest year after year after year in building more homes for a growing country.
And Mr. Speaker, a growing country and a growing economy also demand a growing workforce. A lack of workers and of workers with the right skills is constraining the industrialized economies around the world. But there is good news, Mr. Speaker. In 2020, Canada had the fastest population growth in the G7. At a time when the world is starved for workers and talent, our country's unique enthusiasm for welcoming new Canadians is a powerful driver of economic prosperity. This budget will make it easier for the skilled immigrants that our economy needs to make Canada their home, and will make sure that they can work in the field they were trained for.
Also invest in the determined and talented workers who are already here. We will make it more affordable for people working in the skilled trades to travel to where the jobs are. Programs like the Enhanced Canada Workers Benefit will make it more worthwhile for people to work and will make life more affordable for our lowest paid and very often most essential workers. We will invest in the skills that Canadian workers need to fill the good-paying jobs of today and tomorrow. And we will break down barriers and ensure that everyone is able to roll up their sleeves and get to work. And yes, one of those barriers is affordable childcare. When we promised less than a year ago to make high-quality, affordable childcare a reality for all Canadians, our plan was certainly welcomed. But the cheers were muted by justifiable skepticism. After all, similar promises had been made and broken for decades. 5 decades, in fact. That's why, as I stand here today, I am so glad to say we have delivered. We have now signed agreements on early learning and childcare with every single province and territory in our great country. This is women's liberation. It will mean more women no longer need to choose between motherhood and a career. This is feminist economic policy in action, and it will make life more affordable for middle-class Canadian families. Fees are already being slashed across the country. By the end of this year, they will be reduced by an average of 50%. And in 3 years, childcare will cost an average of just $10 a day. From coast to coast to coast. Housing and immigration and skills and childcare. These are social policies, to be sure. But just as importantly, they are economic policies as well. Our strategy is what Janet Yellen, the U.S. Secretary of the Treasury, recently dubbed modern supply-side economics. Modern supply-side economics borrows the supply-sider's key insight that increasing supply is fundamental to growth, but takes a progressive, people-centered approach. At a time when our chief economic problem is that there is too much demand chasing too little supply, this set of people-centered policies provides exactly what Canada needs right now. This pillar will create supply-led growth that satisfies the demand today driving inflation. It will help our economy grow sustainably, and it will make all of our lives more affordable. Notre deuxième pilier pour la croissance.
Our second pillar for growing our economy is the green transition. In Canada and around the world, climate action is no longer a matter of political debate nor personal conviction. It is an existential challenge. That means it is also an economic necessity. In the largest economic transformation since the Industrial Revolution, the world economy is going green. Canada can be in the vanguard, or we can be left behind. That is, of course, no choice at all, which is why our government is investing urgently in this shift. Our plan is driven by our national price on pollution, the smartest, most effective incentive for climate action. The budget also proposes the creation of a new Canada Growth Fund, which will help attract the billions of dollars in private capital we need to transform our economy at great speed and at scale.
Nous investirons dans les minéraux.
We will be investing in Canada's abundant critical minerals and metals. They are a key part of going green. The world's democracies must be able to produce them for themselves and for others. As car makers urgently upgrade their assembly lines to make zero-emission vehicles, we will be making sure Canadians can afford them.
Nous fabriquerons les batteries.
We will manufacture the batteries that power zero-emission cars and trucks, and we will invest in charging stations from coast to coast. For our children, that means cleaner air and cleaner water tomorrow. And it will also mean good jobs for Canadians today.
Dès aujourd'hui. Our third pillar for growth is a plan to tackle the Achilles heel of the Canadian economy: productivity and innovation. Canadians are the best educated people in the OECD. Our scientists win Nobel Prizes, and our cities are outshining Silicon Valley in creating high-paying technology jobs. Nous accusons toutefois du
But we're falling behind when it comes to economic productivity. Productivity matters because that's what guarantees the dream of every parent, that our children will be more prosperous than we are. This is a well-known Canadian problem and an insidious one. It's time for Canada to tackle it. And we propose to do just that, in part, with a new innovation and investment agency, drawing on best practices from around the world. The agency will give companies across the country and across our economy the tools and incentives they need to create and invest and to produce more with less. We will encourage small Canadian companies to grow. We will help Canadians and Canadian companies develop new intellectual property and turn their new ideas into new businesses and new jobs. Mr. Speaker, these three pillars, investing in people, investing in the green transition, and investing in innovation and productivity will create jobs and prosperity today and build a stronger economic future for our kids. They will make life more affordable, and they will ensure Canada continues to be the best place in the world to live, work, and raise a family.
From the first day we started working on this budget, this growth agenda was always going to be our focus. And then Vladimir Putin invaded Ukraine. On that dark morning of February 24th, a day of infamy, we woke up to a world utterly transformed. When Putin opened fire on the people of Ukraine, he also turned his guns on the unprecedented era of prosperity that the world's democracies had worked so diligently to build over more than 76 years. Our rules-based international order, built from the ashes of the Second World War, today confronts the greatest threat since its inception. And so, our response has been swift and strong. Canada and our allies have imposed the toughest sanctions ever inflicted on a major economy. Russia has become an economic pariah. But the mutilated people of Bucha, shot with their hands tied behind their backs, have shown us that is not enough. Putin and his henchmen are war criminals. The world's democracies, including our own, can be safe only once the Russian tyrant and his armies are entirely vanquished. And that is what we are counting on the brave people of Ukraine to do. Because they are fighting our fight, a fight for democracy. It is in our own urgent national interest to ensure that they have the missiles and the money they need to win. And that is what this budget helps to provide. Russia's invasion of Ukraine has also reminded us that our own peaceful democracy, like all the democracies of the world, depends ultimately on the defense of hard power. The world's dictators should never mistake our civility for pacifism. We know that freedom does not come for free, and that peace is guaranteed only by our readiness to fight for it. That is why we are making an immediate additional investment in our armed forces and propose a swift defense policy review to equip Canada for a world that has become more dangerous. This budget will help provide the fiscal and physical firepower we need to meet any threat that may confront us. And we understand that security includes energy security, which Canada must work to ensure for ourselves and our democratic partners. C'est pourquoi nous investissons.
That is why we are making an immediate additional investment in our armed forces. It's also why we're proposing a swift defense policy review to equip Canada for a world that has become more dangerous. This budget will help provide the fiscal and the physical firepower we need to meet any threat that may rise to face us.
The convoys of Russian tanks rolling across Ukraine did not change the fundamental goal of this budget, Mr. Speaker. But Putin's attack on Ukraine and that country's remarkable and valiant resistance has reinforced our government's deepest conviction, a line that runs through this budget and in each of the budgets that have preceded it, that the strength of a country does not come solely from the vastness of the reserves of its central bank or from the size of the force in its garrisons. Those do matter, to be sure, but they matter less than democracy itself. They can be defeated. They are being defeated by a people who are united and free, because it is the people of who are every country's real source of strength. That is true in Ukraine, and it is true in Canada. So let me explain what we need if we are to build a strong country here at home. We need housing that is affordable for everyone, and investments that ensure an entire generation is not priced out of owning a home. We need to fight climate change so that we can leave our children with a livable planet. We need to face up to the sins of our past and ensure that Indigenous peoples in this country are able to live dignified and prosperous lives. We need a healthcare system that allows people to see a doctor or a dentist and to get mental health care too. We need a society that is truly equal for everyone, because the color of your skin or who you love or where you were born should not dictate whether you get to share in the opportunities that Canada provides. We need a robust tax system that ensures everyone pays their fair share. And we need an economy that allows businesses to grow and create good middle-class jobs where everyone can earn a decent living for an honest day's work. Le courageux peuple.
The brave people of Ukraine have shaken the world's older democracies out of our 21st century malaise. They have reminded us that the strength of a country comes from the strength of its people. And they've reminded us that there should be no greater priority for everyone in this house than to build a country we would all be willing to fight for.
Prêt à nous battre. C'est sur.
That's what we've worked to do these last 7 years. And that is what we will keep on doing today.
The brave people of Ukraine have shaken the world's older democracies out of our 21st century malaise. They have reminded us all that the strength of a country comes from the strength of its people. And they have reminded us that there should be no greater priority for everyone in this house than to build a country that we would all be willing to fight for. That is what we have worked to do these past 7 years, and that is what we will continue to do today.
I'll have a 10-minute question and comment session. The honourable member for Abbotsford.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I notice the minister is wearing Conservative blue today. But that does not in any way transform her budget from being the first left-leaning NDP Liberal budget. So, Mr. Speaker, the most pressing issue facing Canadians today is the cost of living, especially the housing affordability crisis. Millions of Canadians have seen their dream of homeownership slip through their fingers, and uncontrolled spending from this NDP Liberal government has had a lot to do with that. Now, the minister's budget includes $10 billion for housing and homelessness, including $4 billion for a housing accelerator that will actually go to municipalities, not to those who wish to purchase homes but can't afford to do so right now. So in her speech, the minister made the following promise. Over the next 10 years, we will double the number of homes we build. Can the minister tell us? Mr. Speaker, this is a serious question. Can the minister tell us exactly how many homes she and her government have actually built over the past, say, 7 years? And just the number, please. I know she has to have the number because she made the claim. So again, how many homes has her government built over the last 7 years?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to thank the member opposite, first of all, by pointing to the color of my suit today. I chose it intentionally, and I chose the color of this button. I thought it was important to show my solidarity, and I think the solidarity of everyone in this House. And I am glad to see the member opposite wearing a blue and yellow tie. I've recently learned, in fact, that his roots, like my own family's, are in Ukraine. I'm glad that the member opposite spoke about housing. Maybe that's something else we can all agree on. Housing is the most pressing economic and social issue in Canada today. And that's why it is the centerpiece of this budget, just as early learning and childcare was the centerpiece of last year's budget. What is new and important about this budget, which again the member opposite has helpfully pointed out, is a focus on supply. What is new is an understanding that what we need to do as a country is find ways to tear down the barriers to building more homes. And the member correctly points out that many of those barriers are at the municipal level. There are a lot of former city councillors and mayors in this House. They all understand very, very well that what we need to do is find ways to work together with municipalities, with provinces, with territories to build more of the homes Canadians need. And we will do it, Mr. Speaker. We got early learning and childcare done, and we are committed over the next 10 years to doubling the new housing starts in Canada.
Question commentaire, l'honorable député.
The honourable member for Mirabel. Mr. Speaker, Quebec provinces, the Quebec Healthcare Centre is asking for Canada Health transfers to be increased to 35% of all healthcare expenditures. Not this year, not next year, not the year after have we seen any increase in Canada Health transfers, but it's written that if provinces call Ottawa, it will be to be advised as to how they can better manage their healthcare system and make it more efficient and effective. Mr. Speaker, can the Minister tell us why she believes that a government that has never managed a hospital can better manage healthcare than the provinces themselves? The Honourable Minister for Finance. Mr. Speaker, we fully understand that it is of provincial and territorial jurisdiction. Our healthcare system in Canada is excellent. We also understand that the federal government has to help with funding the healthcare system. That is the reason for which it is written in the budget that we have just disbursed $2 billion to provinces and territories to help them with issues caused by the COVID crisis. I would also like to add that in this budget, we are proposing to invest $45.2 billion. This is a monumental amount to support provinces and territories through the Canada Health Transfer. And, Mr. Speaker, this is an increase, a 4.8% increase as compares to the reference basis.
Commentaire, questions and comments. The Honourable Member for Elmwood-Transcona.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. You know, the Minister has heard from hundreds of experts that have told her, and I'll quote, Mr. Speaker, that carbon capture, utilization and storage is neither economically sound nor proven at scale, with a terrible track record and limited potential to deliver significant, cost-effective emissions reductions. And yet, despite the IPCC just having released another damning report about the state of the climate crisis, that carbon capture and storage is the cornerstone of the climate efforts here in this budget, Mr. Speaker. Does the minister recognize that the over $2.5 billion that they've allocated for carbon capture and storage is a missed opportunity to build national renewable energy projects like a Western power grid that could put people to work and actually help us create new renewable sources of energy in Canada, which is something we absolutely have to do if we're going to be able to electrify our economy and lower our greenhouse gas emissions?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I think Canadians at home listening to the proceedings of this House will be a bit confused by what they are hearing, because they've heard a lot about collaboration between progressive parties, and yet on this issue, I must differ from my honourable colleague. I absolutely believe, and our budget is very clear, on the value of CCUS when it comes to a realistic, achievable, and attainable emissions reduction plan. The oil and gas sector is part of the Canadian economy, and it needs to be part of our emissions reduction effort. The CCUS plan, which we have worked on collaboratively with our environmental partners, with our oil and gas partners, is a very important part of that plan. It will help Canada reduce our emissions, and that is something that I think all of us agree is essential. The member has spoken about the need to invest in renewable energy. We agree. That's why this budget includes considerable investments in the green transition, building on the vast investments in the green transition our government has hitherto made, including the Canada Growth Fund, which will crowd in private capital for this essential economic transformation.
And we have time for maybe another 30-second question and answer. The Honourable Member for Edmonton West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This appears, like all the other budgets so far from this government, to be one of lots of spending and good intentions, but no results. The Parliamentary Budget Officer states there's as many Canadians living in vulnerable homes as there were when the government started, despite billions spent. Despite billions spent, the Library of Parliament says GHG emissions are going up every year. The Library of Parliament also says this government has had the 29th worst performance for debt to GDP ratio. Further, their report, The Long Road, says Canada, for the next 30 years, will have the worst economic growth in the OECD. So if non-stop spending and crippling debt hasn't worked so far, what has changed that is going to work now?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I am really sorry to say that the member opposite is simply inaccurately citing statistics. The reality is that Canada's economic growth today is among the strongest in the world. Our GDP grew by more than 6% in the fourth quarter, is on track to grow 4% in the first quarter. Canada's economic recovery is robust. It is remarkable, particularly when it comes to jobs. And in terms of debt to GDP and deficits, Canada is in the strongest fiscal position of any G7 country.
And that's all the time we have for that. The reprise du débat, l'honneur of the member for Abbotsford.
Where there is no vision, the people perish. Now that is a proverb that one of my Liberal colleagues used earlier today. But it was in a different context. It was in the context of Easter. But the context in which I'm going to use it is a budget that is absolutely bereft of any vision. The budget is bereft of any vision to meaningfully address what currently matters most to Canadians, which is the skyrocketing cost of living and housing affordability crisis. There's no real plan to fight the inflation that has exacerbated this government's tax and spend profligacy. There's no overarching investment into economic growth. No growth plan to improve our productivity and our ability to compete in the global marketplace. There's no grand plan to restore Canada's tarnished reputation as a good place to invest. Right now we are dead last among the OECD countries when it comes to investment. Nor is there a grand vision to manage the massive debt load that my children and grandchildren will be left to repay, with interest, of course. As with last year's budget, this one fails to put forward a credible fiscal anchor that outlines a clear pathway and a firm target to return to balance. There is no grand vision for restoring Canada's reputation as a trusted middle power amongst the world's nations. Neither is there a serious plan to harness the power and potential of our sustainably produced natural resources to address the environmental challenges facing our world. In short, this budget fails to deliver the visionary leadership that these times call for. Instead, this budget is emblematic of an unserious Prime Minister, an unserious Finance Minister, and an unserious government. Where there is no vision, the people perish. That's from the Proverbs of Solomon, considered among the wisest men ever to walk this earth. We need a vision, Mr. Speaker. And I'll have more to say in the days ahead. But until then, Mr. Speaker, and until tomorrow, I move, seconded by the member for Lethbridge, that the debate be now adjourned.
Mr. Fast, seconded by Ms. Thomas, moves that the debate now be adjourned. Pursuant to Standing Order 83-2, the motion is deemed adopted and the House stands adjourned until tomorrow at 10 a.m. pursuant to Standing Order 24-1.
This show has been produced by Depictions Media. Please contact us at depictions.media for more information.